Hi.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on time. We'll give it just one more minute for participants to file in and then we can start. Alrighty, we won't penalize people who are on time and early, of course. So once again, welcome everyone to our online session titled Youth Leadership and Peace, Bridging Humanitarian Principles in Action. This session is organized by the Youth Commission of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, or for short, the IFRC, specifically our fundamental principles and sustainable peace working group driven by the Youth Commission. This session is also supported by the Global Youth Mobilization, which is an initiative of the Big Six youth organizations. And we would also like to thank the Global Youth Mobilization Project Coordination Team, as well as the Big Six, one of the Big Six organizations, specifically the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, for their technical support that's provided for the organization of today's session. Through the Global Youth Mobilization Initiative, including as well IFRC's Limitless program, young people worldwide are leading efforts to tackle some of the most pressing global challenges. This includes poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. Youth-led action and decision-making have consistently proven to be critical agents of change. Currently, the Global Youth Mobilization is partnering with the European Union to deliver the Youth Empowerment Fund. This initiative provides youth-friendly funding for projects that contribute to the sustainable development of local communities. If you would like to find out more, there is a short 2-minute video that we will share in the chat. You can access it on YouTube. This virtual session will explore the intersection between humanitarian principles and youth-led peace-building initiatives. It also aims to position young people not merely as beneficiaries of peace processes and peaceful communities, but as principle-driven peace architects who can bridge traditional humanitarian frameworks with innovative approaches to conflict resolution and community resilience. We're really, really excited to have all of you here. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from currently as well. And how rude of me, I've not introduced myself yet. My name is Michelle, and I'll be your main facilitator for today's session. I chair the IFRC Youth Commission, and I'm also one of the co-leads for the YC's Working Group on Fundamental Principles and Sustainable Peace. Before we start, I have some logistic reminders to share so that together we can create a conducive virtual space for everyone who's participating in today's session. We aim to be accessible and inclusive of all young people. Therefore, this session will be held in English, but live spoken interpretation will be available in Spanish, French, and Arabic. There are also translated captions available in 35 different languages. And we encourage you to turn on closed captions for the session by clicking the CC button along the bottom menu if needed to support your understanding. Please follow the following guidelines for this session to make it a success for everyone. So please make sure you're staying on mute unless you're requested to speak. Please rename yourselves to include your country, if you're comfortable, and very importantly, your preferred language of communication in English, Spanish, French, or Arabic for our technical team to facilitate the breakout room distribution. And can we have the next 2 slides, please? We'll also share the example of how you should name yourselves in the naming convention. In the chat. This session will be recorded and it may be shared and uploaded via social media channels afterwards. So if you do not wish for your image to be included, please make sure that you keep your camera turned off. We also encourage you to use the question and answer function for any questions that you may have for our speakers. You can find it by looking at the menu at the bottom of your screen and clicking Q&A. The Q&A function is where our team will be able to answer your questions. Thank you so much for your attention. And let us now officially begin today's session. And instead of textbook knowledge, I'm someone who strongly believes in the power of storytelling and experience sharing. Therefore, you would be able to see this being weaved through in today's session, and you'll be able to listen to a lot of lived experiences from young people and adults, likewise from all walks of life and backgrounds, which are our speakers today. Therefore, before we delve into the more theoretical and practical discussions, we also have the privilege to hear from inspiring youth who have lived in contexts of crisis and are building peace in their own unique way. Firstly, I will introduce to you Marina. Marina, I had the pleasure of working with her during my previous tenure on the IFRC Youth Commission. And I was really amazed by Marina's courage and voice during one of the most difficult times for her, living through the war in Ukraine and having to leave behind her loved ones in pursuit of her safety and well-being. She has then obviously turned that into courage and planted the seeds within IFRC to advocate for the emphasis of safeguarding frontline volunteers in crisis contexts. Over to you, Marina. Let us hear your story.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, everyone. I see some screen with stories. It should be like that, or someone sharing their screens to everyone. Just to point out, yeah, that seems more like that. Thank you again for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure how encouraging and motivating I can be, but I'm happy to share some of my stories since I'm Ukrainian. I'm experienced conflict and war in my country that's still ongoing. And also I've tried to work on it from humanitarian perspective since during the last 2 years before I work as a delegate to Brussels from Ukrainian Red Cross Society to coordinate humanitarian advocacy and policy. And what I wanted to share today is that there is a really huge gap of understanding between community who really live in emergency every day and those who observe and want to build peace or help. And I think for us, it's really important to understand, as many of you are passionate or probably work in these projects, that sometimes people on local level, who we usually frame as heroes, not necessarily operate there and try to build peace or respond to humanitarian emergency because they're heroes, they believe in principles. In many cases, it's a need and pressure of community, and I want all of us to recognize this as fact. Because when emergency happening, and especially war or conflict, our psychological reactions may be very, very different. And in most cases, people were stuck in trauma, and it causes very long-term effects that unfortunately not well researched now yet and not well spoken around. And of course, people in these circumstances, as they want to respond, they want to help their community. And we sometimes see, oh my God, they're such a hero. They go under rockets to help someone. They're doing this great initiative, helping people in needs. But in many cases, it's not necessary that people operate by humanitarian principles and put human life in front of everything. It's because they often feel a lot of pressure of society, especially if they belong already to movement like Red Cross, Red Crescent, or other organization who work there. Because once you associate it with organizations like providing help or building peace or helping community, building social cohesion, you have a lot of pressure to act like that and be lifesaver of people in a way, because it's how we picture ourselves sometime in peaceful time. And when war arrive, people in at local community, they become under huge pressure. And it's something I also experienced personally when the war just escalating, and some of my friends were very close to front line. Some of them were killed eventually. But you, because you're associated with Red Cross, some other people calling you, you should quit everything and go and help our families because you are Red Cross. You should risk your life because you are Red Cross or other humanitarian actor. And it's something like I see very big problem in this context, that people have misperception to us. So when you position you as peace builder or humanitarian organization, we should be very clear who we are, what we can do, what we can't do, and especially we need to talk about it for our people who live in front line, who live in emergency, because very often because of these narratives, they're ready to die just not to feel guilt or pressure that they not fulfill expectation of being someone who want to help their community. So this is one very important moment. And another important moment I would like all of us to consider, again connected to narrative, how we communicate in media. I saw today at this nice poster story of courage. In many cases, people who risk their life and experience work in emergency, not necessary courage narrative helping them, because when we talk about courage in a way, we kind of like highlight that there's something extra, these people go extra mile, and by this narrative sometimes we push ourselves and other people to do something that not necessarily helping themselves and not necessarily safe. So this is one of the very important moment to highlight. And another from personal experience, that it's very easy to get demoralized. And I want to ask all of you who work in emergency or want to support people who experience very difficult circumstances, we need to recognize that the people in extremely hard situation, especially those who lost relatives, beloved, even though they might believed before in humanitarian principles, in certain time for them, it's very easy to get demoralized, especially if they see injustice, if they see that their trauma not well recognized, especially by the party who caused this trauma for them. It's very hard to talk about peace building process and dialogue. And these people simply need time and space to suffer. And we can do the best hour to recognize it and support them on this journey. At the same time, we might experience this ourselves when we think injustice, when we are affected by war or crisis, or we facing injustice. It's very hard to speak loudly at this moment about peace building and humanitarian principle, because the reality is our brain can't cope with this trauma and this injustice, and it's take long time to settle down, get back, and start to operate normally in line with our mission, vision, etc. Sometimes we don't talk about it because we think that we're superhero, but we are human, and our brain sometimes just need time to process trauma. And that's actually would be probably one of my main call to action to all of you when you work with the community who are affected, when you work especially with the community where you can see armed conflict or very big geopolitical situation happening. We need to recognize that the people might not be able just jump to our peace building initiative and speak about humanitarian principles when their beloved was killed by party A or party B. We need to give space and time to recognize this trauma. And also, our national society sometimes can't fully operate impartially and independent and neutral because we still operate under government. And it's another very important moment to consider in your or like in our peace initiatives, and recognize it as a fact. Yes, we stand for our principles, but in order to stay for them, we need to recognize that in some cases, community just can't do that, and it's okay. And we need to recognize it, give them space, and find alternative how we can work through this. Because sometimes we are not superhero ourselves. We can't uh, do like conflict resolution like on a big level when people experience deep trauma. So that would be probably my main point I wanted to say. And yeah, let me know if you have any question, but for now, I guess that's it from my side.
Thank you, Marina. Always very inspiring. And I know that's probably not the right word to use. But she shared with us, obviously, some of the narratives that might sometimes be harmful, despite in our line of work in, development or humanitarian organizations, there's oftentimes this hero narrative, and young people ourselves might feel pressured to perform even in times of crisis and even when we're also facing trauma ourselves. So thanks, Marina, for really reminding us of, not, I guess, not being drowned by the narrative and to still, in a sense, be mindful of that, take care of ourselves as well, and to also not impose it onto other people because we never really know what everyone else is going as well. Very powerful story, Marina. If you have any questions for Marina, feel free to leave them in the chat. I think Marina can stay on for a bit to answer these questions. But yeah, next up, let's hear from another friend or colleague of mine, Ahmed Abdulghani, who's a young peace advocate from Libya. Ahmed is someone that I know through the Kofi Annan Change Makers program this year. He's a peace builder that's driving youth-led solutions to conflict and climate challenges within the MENA region, with a particular focus on Libya, his home country. He's also a lead at the MENA Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, empowering young people through innovation, knowledge sharing, and tailored approaches. Some of his key achievements include Libya's first national climate competition, the Climate Ambassador Network, and also launching the first NGO fundraising department through the Perpetual Peace Foundation. So Ahmed will share with us his story of peace building in a region filled with conflict, as well as his work on the intersection between climate justice and peace. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and hello everyone. Happy to see you. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. It's nice to see so much peacemaker and actors in one room. So my name is Ahmed. I am based now in Libya. I work in MENA region, and an area that's heavily influenced by conflict, by wars, and also by political struggle. Growing up in Libya, I grew up in very difficult timing during civil war. I work mainly in humanitarian peace building with UN actors. I worked in many conflict settings, for example, in Sudan, in Yemen, in Palestine, in Libya, also working and supporting peace processes, peace framework, also, and engaging and supporting youth through youth peace and security agenda. To be honest, working on peace building on a humanitarian action or working on this difficult setting, I found a common thing in all of these contexts that most of the actors on the ground are young people. Most of the actors that supporting, that providing services, that are present despite chaos and conflict are young people. The young people, and despite all of this, are the driving factors for peace processes. And despite limited resources, despite the lack of knowledge on the action they are doing, they are trying their best. And they are doing their best to move and change the context. And this is the most important thing that bring all of us together. That despite the change, the difficult context that we all operate in, despite the action that need to be done, either through humanitarian peace processes or even in vocational training or entrepreneurship, we are trying our best through youth leadership action. And building on this common ground that bring all of us as a youth, bring all of us as an actors on the ground, we need to find out we find that ourselves as a young people, as a people working on the ground, that there is need for more action. There is need for more support for young people. And this support, and despite the most of the action that's done by young people, we find them the one lacking resources, lacking support, lacking knowledge, and also the one unrecognized. So by seeing all of you here, I know that you have been there, you have felt the same action despite and working in different settings, feeling unrecognized, feeling that you are doing most of the work, you are doing most of the action, and also you are trying to convince the people with resources, the people with the ability to change the context, trying to convince them to one table, trying to bring them that there is a change need to happen. And this is something that's bring us all together. That's something that despite all the context, the difference in the context, the difference in the resources we have, the difference in the way that we operate, the thematic we operate in, something that bring us all together. I'm not gonna bring so much. I'm not going so much into details about the work that I'm doing, but I wanted to start up by saying what bring us all together here, what's coming between us, despite us from different regions, from different areas, from different contexts, from different thematic. We all brought together for the need of change, for the desire of change, for the desire that we want to see a brighter tomorrow, a tomorrow that take human rights as a priority, that take peace processes, youth leadership as a priority, as something that need to be recognized, something that need to be implemented, and not just a complementary processes inside this storm of chaos that's happening in every context. So thank you so much, and I hope I didn't take so much.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I think a very strong call to action at the end there as well, for young people to really, and I guess not just young people, but everyone, actors in the world to really prioritize peace and peace building, because it's not supposed to just be a complementary process, but it should really be weaved into everything that we do, no matter, what our specialties, or our technical expertise are in that sense. So yeah, I hope that, all of you have taken your first step into, either starting to be more aware about sort of like peace building efforts, or maybe how you can also take part in this movement of peace builders by joining today's session. So once again, thank you so much, Ahmed, for joining our session today. Similarly, if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the Q&A box, and Ahmed might also be here to answer them. All right, next up, we have a session that will shed light onto principled humanitarian action, the presentation actually. At the IFRC, our humanitarian work to prevent and alleviate human suffering wherever it may be found is anchored on our 7 fundamental principles. In line with this, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement also go by the motto of per humanitatem ad pacem, which means true humanity to peace. So in the next 15 minutes, our presenter, Sylvia, will delve into the importance of humanitarian principles as tools for peace building and conflict resolution. Similarly, I have had the honor to work closely with Sylvia in the past 5 years during my previous term on the Youth Commission. To introduce you to Sylvia, she's a lifelong humanitarian and peace builder whose journey began with the Colombian Red Cross in 2010, where she served as a youth volunteer and later on youth president and board member of the Colombian Red Cross. Her passion for peace building really starts. Her passion for peace building includes educating ex-combatants from the former FARC guerrilla group in nonviolent communication, as well as mediation in a reconciliation process across Colombia. She later also worked for the Program of Peace and Human Rights of the Swiss Embassy in Colombia, where she gained experience in international efforts to promote a participatory and holistic approach of dealing with the past and conflict. Later on, we became colleagues, where, we worked on the Youth Commission together, and she was the vice chair of the commission. We also developed the youth engagement strategy of the IFRC together. And she recently earned her master's in sustainable peace building from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as well. So, I can't think of a better expert to walk us through this session. And currently, Sylvia is also a volunteer with the American Red Cross, where she helps emergency response team, and she continues to contribute, to the Red Cross, and really brings with her or live the 7 humanitarian principles of the Red Cross in her journey. of being a volunteer. So without further ado, over to you, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Oh, what a heavy weight you put on me when you said, like, I couldn't think about a better expert on this matter, because I believe everyone is an expert in its own way in regards how to be a peace builder. But I'm here to share my experience, and I'm also here to share my screen. So please let me know if you are able to see it. Okay, it should be in your screens now. It is?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can see it.
So, buenos dias, hola, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, whatever you're joining from. It is a truly honor to be here with you today and reflect on our fundamental principles, humanity, neutrality, and impartiality, and how they are not just words, but real peace tools that guide our work on our lives. We as youth organization and as youth in the world, we often speak of peace as something grand, something political or far away. But peace also lives in the small, in these quiet decisions that we make every day, how we show up, how we listen, and how we serve. So part of my presentation today is about it, about how we can find our principles as tools in a daily peace practice. First of all, I would like you to take a look at this picture that I have in the cover. Maybe if you can see it like in detail, you will see there is a puppet peeking out of the window of a Red Cross vehicle. Can you see it, guys? It's very small, but it's there, right? So this photo means a lot to me because it was a mission I was with the Red Cross I was part of, but also because I think it represents the spirit of our principles when we put them in action. Like even in places marked by conflict and uncertainty, there's always room for hope. And sometimes it is carried in the most unexpected ways as a puppet. I will talk a little bit more about this experience later. And I will ask you to please take note of what you are going to hear in the story, because afterwards I would like you to share how do you think the story I'm sharing, or every like action in the story represents either humanity, neutrality, or impartiality for you. I will give you at the end my own insights, but I also would like to hear from you. So let's start. Michelle told you I'm from Colombia. Oh. So I was born in this small town that is nestled in the Colombian mountains. It's called San Andres. It's a place of river, waterfalls, stories, nature, and a lot of food around. Our house was this house. It had a big open patio, flowers everywhere, and there was a garden that fed us. We had avocado trees, orange trees, chicken. If I wanted to make my breakfast, I would just go to the backyard to collect the food to make it. I was 7 years old. I was very small. When one afternoon, the peace of my village was disrupted by the sound of gunfire. My grandmother pulled me into the kitchen while bullets echoed outside. That was the day the armed conflict reached our town. And days later, we fled to the city. Everything changed. No more food from our garden, no more safety, no more nature around, no more access to the river and the mountains. On the way going to the city, the only thing I remember is a white sheet on the road covering a body. And yet I told myself, we're lucky. What I see in the news is even worse. The life in the city was so fast-paced and so different from what it used to be in my small town. And we ended up living in a cramped room, my whole family, for what we thought it was going to be just temporary, but ended up being 5 years. And that's where my understanding of compassion began, not as a word, but as a need. Even in fear, there was still kindness. Someone gave us a meal, someone shared the roof. Humanity wasn't gone at all, but it was quietly holding us together. This is the city I moved to. And when I was growing up, people in the city had different expectations and different goals in life. So I faced what many children face when they are growing. They face this question like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would always say, like, my dream is to make the world a better place. When I answered this, people will laugh. And I didn't understand why people were laughing. But quietly, my voice started fading, and I started changing my answer for things like, I want to live in a bigger house, I want to have lots of money, I want to have a nice job. But I felt I was betraying my own heart. It was until I joined the Red Cross years later. I was on a first aid course training, and then the instructor showed us a video that showed images of disasters, conflicts, scenes of human suffering, followed by scenes of hope. Volunteers rescuing, comforting, rebuilding, and helping people all around the world. And that inspired me again. And I said, this is the place I want to be. And I signed up right away for the volunteering course. So I switched from the first aid course to become a volunteer of the Red Cross. On my first day as a volunteer, and this is like my cohort of volunteers in the pictures, I'm the one that is right sitting on the floor. I have changed a lot. It's been almost 15 years. But these people that were sitting there, we all faced the same question again by the instructor. He asked, what are your dreams? He asked us to share that. I was very nervous to answer that question, and I said quietly, like not so loud, I said like, I want to make the world a better place. And this time, no one laughed. In that circle, when I was surrounded by other volunteers, I rediscovered what it means to belong to something larger than fear. Years later, I was able to experience many of the programs of the Red Cross. And this picture is one mission that is very dear to me. It was a medical mission, a health brigade in a region that was isolated by landslides, floodings, but also years of violence. The conflict was active in this region. So we brought doctors, medicine, and food. And when we were leaving the Red Cross office, I said, like, I'm gonna bring some puppets just in case. So this is the story about the puppet there. Because like we were just planning to bring help, but we said like, just in case. Of course, we had adults, but many children around as well. And I said, let's set up the puppet show here. So we started, and we will always open the show saying, asking the children, like, do you know where puppets live? And no kid answered. There was complete silence. I asked again, guys, do you know where puppet lived? And they were kind of wondering what was going on. So I switched my question to, have you ever seen a puppet? And everyone replied no. So that was the first time that this community was able to see puppets. We had children for many years and even adults that never in their lives had experienced before a puppet show. That day we laughed together, and for a few moments the community felt alive again. This is a picture of when we were returning from the mission and we were just playing with the puppets outside the Red Cross cars, because we were so happy for what we have achieved in that community, not only in terms of health, but also in terms of building community and bringing dignity. So peace sometimes begins with a smile, not a speech, and with small gestures that say you are not forgotten. And that mission taught me that in the middle of crisis, what matters most isn't what we bring, but how we bring it. And after we returned, we decided to implement, like, besides every project in this community, besides the health project, also implementing crafts, arts, and bringing joy to the community. Later, in my Red Cross journey, I joined the Landmine Risk Education Project, one of the most challenging and meaningful experiences of my life. So Colombia, a country that has been affected by war for so many years, face a hard reality, and that's the reality of landmines and unexploded war devices. So one of the things we did with the Red Cross was going through the countryside, teaching children and adults how to avoid and how to identify remnants of war and how to avoid being affected by them, what to do, and how to recognize it. And so we traveled to rural areas that were deeply affected by the armed conflict, places where the sounds of the explosion were still there, active, and in general, fear shaped every path people walk. So our goal was to teach them how to avoid and how to recognize landmines. But to even enter those territories, we first had to gain trust from all sides of the conflict because the conflict was still active. And for years, the Colombian Red Cross had worked carefully to build that trust with government forces, with non-state armed groups, and with the communities trapped in between. When we finally arrived, people opened their doors to us because they knew the Red Cross was neutral, impartial, and humanitarian, and that we were there for everyone's safety and not anyone's agenda. That access, the ability to serve in the middle of conflict, was not granted by power, but by principle. And I remember a mother telling me in one of those workshops, you are the first people that come here not asking for something, but bringing something that can save our children's life. And that sentence stays with me because it showed how trust built through principles can literally protect lives. And not only protect lives in the communities, but also protect the lives of our own volunteers. I do not have a picture of those workshops because part of gaining trust was not taking pictures of the community, right? But this is a side workshop that I was holding for nurses and healthcare workers in how to identify also landmines, but how to provide a better assistance also, like in terms of rights and the path that they will have to follow to ensure that their rights are reestablished when they see a patient that has been affected by a landmine in their healthcare system. And later, another part of my story is that I was the youth president of the Colombian Red Cross, and I was part of the governing board of the Colombian Red Cross. This is the governing board, and I'm standing there in the middle, and I was the youngest, and the difference in age was like around 25 years with the next younger in the board. And I can't tell how enrichful this experience was to me, to also like create like more appropriation of our principles and be more empowered to embody them, and also make sure that the Red Cross is actively applying those principles in everything we do. One day in that board meeting, we faced a tough decision whether to start a program with ex-combatants who were rejoining civilian life after the peace accords. And the room was divided. It wasn't an easy decision because some feared that working with them would harm our reputation. And others like me said it was exactly what peace required. Even myself, that grew up in a village and was affected by the armed conflict, I was thinking this is exactly aligned with our principles and is what peace needs. And I remember the silence when we voted. We knew that whatever decision we made, someone would disagree. But we chose to go forward, to meet, to listen, and to build trust. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And when we started this project with these combatants, something wonderful happened. Jude was the most active volunteer group in the Red Cross that was working in peace building initiatives. I myself was leading a group of conflict transformation and mediation for youth that were in the social penal responsibility system. And we were trying to teach them different ways to live their lives so they could have more tools for conflict resolution. And then the coordinator of this project called our organization, the youth, and said, like, we want you to lead the reconciliation workshops with ex-combatants from the guerrillas and the communities that were affected by them. It was a very hard challenge. We were nervous because we would normally work with children and young people, but not adults, and especially not ex-combatants. So during those workshops with former combatants, I asked everyone to draw their life paths from childhood to that moment, to that present moment. And each story was filled with loss, trauma, displacement, death, and longing. It was different sides, but same pain. And we weren't just facilitating activities, we were witnessing humanity being rebuilt. These are some of the drawings that they will draw during those workshops, just showing their path, showing how they were affected by the conflict and how they made a decision to do something different in the country. Some of them choose to go and take the arms, and some others chose to stay in the community or join the Red Cross. So everyone made a different decision at some point in their lives. And at the end of the workshops, two things that I carry with me is that one thing is that you as an instructor, you will normally expect people to tell you what they have learned from those workshops. And I was expecting, like, yeah, conflict resolution is about dialogue and how I open myself, how I share my emotions, and how I establish my needs and a path forward, or something like that, focusing on the content. And then the answers I was getting at the end of the workshops of what they were taking with them was, one of them said, like, this is the first time I was able to play a game or to draw, because work took that away from me. And I'm so grateful with the Red Cross because they gave me this opportunity to be a kid again. And someone also said, this is the first time I felt treated as person and not as past. And those sentences changed me. Those sentences reminded me that peace isn't only about ending conflict, but it's about recognizing each other's dignity again. And then I could continue talking about more of my experiences with the Red Cross, but now I want you to share what you think about what you have heard. So think back on the story you just heard, and please take a moment to share in the chat, or or just think for yourself, where did you see humanity, where did you see neutrality, and where did you see impartiality? And I will try to see the chat, or I don't know if someone can help me, maybe. Let's see. I would like to see. Okay, I can see the chat, but feel free to type in how you think we experience those principles in this story. I can also provide the answers for you, don't worry. Okay. Or maybe someone would like to share. I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself to share a little bit. Okay. And Esbon Ogeto from Kenya say, I saw humanity in the instance when you owe to the city with your family and people you live together with shared meals, right? That's humanity in action. Observé la humanidad al compartir con la población más vulnerable. I observe humanity when sharing with the most vulnerable population. And then we have someone raising the hand in the chat. Prince Will from Nigeria said, providing support to those affected by crisis is humanity. Perfect. And Chive Numba, let me see if I can unmute you or someone can help me unmuting. Yeah, I think you can talk.
Thank you very much. My name is Chiwemumba from Zambia. Well, what stuck out for me the most was when you spoke about how people laughed at what you were thought intended to do. Well, I have now noticed, I've seen that humanity is when we believe in each other, when we trust that we can do it despite looking down on your friend or your colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Shibwe. And that was, in fact, one of the moments where I felt like humanity for myself was also restored when I said, like, I want to make the world a better place, and no one laughed. So it showed also the restoration of human dignity that comes when people are accepted for their purpose. And that's something I experienced in the Red Cross. Let's see. Providing support to those affected by crisis is humanity, right? Making people feel recognized is a golden peace strategy, correct? And when they told you they felt treated as human and not as past, that is humanity as its best. We need to ensure that the aid and assistance we deliver is not merely just to fulfill number targets, but to remember the human that is on the receiving end. Wow, powerful, yes. So those are examples on how we can use our principles as peace building tools. Can you see my presentation again? Yeah. So let's reflect a little bit on humanity, how we saw it in this story. So humanity is that the courage to see people and not labels, to act with empathy even when fear tells us to protect only our own. So when there is a crisis, when there is a disaster, when there is an emergency, most people will run off those places. And people in the humanitarian side, people like in the Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations are the ones willing to go there when everyone is leaving. So in my story, like humanity shows in several like parts of the story, as we said, like someone said, like when you were offered a meal and a shelter, but also when the Red Cross recognized my purpose and nobody laughed. But when we brought, for me especially, like the puppet show with children is a way to show humanity in the way of service as connection. Like that puppet story illustrates humanity in practice. Like we met children's emotional and psychological needs and not just their medical ones. And also bringing joy to a traumatized community is an act of compassion that restores dignity. And then if we would like to talk about neutrality, it's not silent, but it's that strength to stand in the middle of tension and still serve everyone with dignity. It builds bridges where others see boundaries. And we saw boundaries and bridges when we were making the decision in the board about whether to start this project with ex-combatants or just moving through a different path. So neutrality also shows when we saw the Red Cross, the Colombian Red Cross's ability to work in active conflict zones. That's the practical power of neutrality, where the Red Cross felt safe to send volunteers to go to those communities affected by conflict because there was a long time effort to build that trust. So we were able to enter dangerous areas because all sides trusted that our mission was to protect lives and not to take sides. And so this story, like this part of the story, shows perfectly how neutrality builds access and how humanity also saves lives, how we can bring health brigades to those communities because there was trust and everyone was aware of the neutrality of the Red Cross. And then to see impartiality. Impartiality is fairness in action, serving based on need, not history or identity, is what allows healing to reach everyone. So in this workshop with the ex-combatants, right, participants rediscover their capacity to feel, love, to be seen, regardless of what part of the conflict they were taking in, what part of the conflict they were part of. And our stories were not different. So it means beyond those labels that I was a volunteer, they were ex-combatants and they were communities affected by the conflict. Impartiality did its thing because beyond those labels, we treated people equally in dignity and compassion. And here as well, when this ex-combatant said, like, I felt treated as a person and not as a past, it captured the essence of impartiality, but also humanity. So with this reflection, I would like just to let you go today with a question in your minds, like in your own life and in your own projects, in your own organization, where you can practice these principles, not as words, but as daily choices. And something we all have to remember is that peace begins right where we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. Yeah, so it's very powerful statements from you, but I particularly enjoyed your presentation today. And really picking our brains in terms of, asking us to relate to the humanitarian principles that comes into play throughout your own story. And yes, everyone, I promise you stories, and you've already heard a lot of stories so far. Due to time constraints, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the chat, and Sylvia can get to you when she sees them. But once again, thank you, Sylvia, for sharing both your story and for helping us to see how, humanitarian action really comes into play in peace building efforts, and why it's so important for us to be value-based and to be principle-based. Thank you so much once again for joining us today. All right. Now that we've discussed the principles behind peace building, let us hear some practical examples. We'll hear about concrete youth-led initiatives that will also demonstrate the principle-based approach that Sylvia mentioned earlier. Today, we'll have with us two panelists that will be joining the session to share about some of their approaches and initiatives from their own organizations, which are both youth-centric and both part of the Big Six as well. So firstly, I have Gerald joining me today. Gerald is the Regional Volunteering Coordinator at IFRC Asia Pacific. He's also a lifelong youth advocate, and he is driven by the belief in the power of young people to lead change and inspire humanity. His journey in the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement began as a youth volunteer, where he witnessed firsthand how compassion, critical thinking, and empathy can transform lives and communities. This experience has shaped his enduring commitment to the Youth as Agents of Behavioral Change initiative, which is a flagship IFRC program that nurtures young people as champions of nonviolence, peace, and positive social transformation. Yep, throughout his work, Gerald has empowered countless youth to challenge bias, embrace diversity, and act with courage and kindness in the face of adversity. He sees young people not just as future leaders, but as present change makers who are capable of influencing mindsets, bridging divides, and rehumanizing humanitarian action in an increasingly polarized world. Welcome, Gerald. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank
Next
you,
up,
Michelle. Happy to be here.
I have with me Lincoln. Lincoln Tuckman is an active scout leader who's actively involved in capacity building initiatives. Sorry. Yep, of the Scout movement in Malaysia, as well as the Asia Pacific region and the rest of the world through World Scouting. He's the National Program Secretary at the Scouts Association of Malaysia. Lincoln is also a King Scout and holds the role of President of the King Scouts Brotherhood of Malaysia, and he serves as the Membership Director of the Association of Top Achiever Scouts World, or ATAS World, a global fraternity of youth top achievers. Professionally, Lincoln's background is actually a language lecturer at the Faculty of Languages and Linguistics in University Malaya. And his academic interests include English language education, language acquisition, and crisis translation. Welcome, Lincoln, and thanks for joining me here today. Both Gerald and Lincoln bring actually more than a decade of experience in volunteerism individually and youth-led action across local and global perspectives within the Red Cross as well as the Scouts. So without further ado, let us kickstart the discussions. So my first question is for you, Gerald. In your work empowering volunteers, you've really turned your passion into your occupation, as well as young people across communities. You have witnessed transformation happen at the grassroots level. I've mentioned about obviously your expertise in YBC earlier as well. Can you share with us the approach that IFRC uses to strengthen the capacities of young people in nurturing them to be, for example, community peace builders? And how do the IFRC help young people to navigate the complexities of remaining neutral while advocating for peace, which is not necessarily an easy concept? Gerald, over to you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Michelle. And before I jump into my response, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our young people all over the world. It's nice to be here with you. It's really, it's just at the top of the hour, midnight here in Malaysia. So, but I'm very glad to be here with you to have a late night session. So yes, just to share a bit about the question that Michelle said, one of the most impactful approaches that we actually have here in the IFRC is the Youth as Agents of Behavioral Change, or simply we call it as YABC. And it's actually our flagship initiative on youth empowerment and peace building. And I actually have had the privilege of being part of it for several years now as a master trainer. And what actually makes YABC special is that it doesn't start with lectures or theories, but it actually starts from within, from the participant, the youth participants themselves, helping young people to explore their own values, emotions, and sometimes our own biasness as well. And through experiential learning, like role plays, mindfulness exercises, and storytelling, they are able to develop empathy, self-awareness, and even non-violent communication skills. And the young people really get to learn to really listen, and listening in a sense of not just to respond, but actually to understand. So YBC is actually about leading actually from the heart. And it's not about telling others how to behave, or it's actually about living the values of humanity, respect, inclusion, and compassion in our daily lives. And this is what actually builds credibility and trust in the communities that we live in. And when young people become living examples of the change they wish to see themselves. Now, sometimes neutrality is often a tricky thing, especially for youth working in divided or conflict-affected contexts, especially as what Sylvia has just shared earlier as well, and Marina and Ahmad as well. But YABC actually helps them to navigate that by guiding their advocacy in shared humanity rather than political positions. It actually teaches that peace building isn't about choosing sides. It's about creating safe spaces for dialogues, understanding, and also mutual respect. So I've seen young people who, after YBC, became very confident facilitators of dialogue in their own communities, mediating tensions, promoting inclusions, and reminding others that neutrality doesn't mean silence. It actually means standing for humanity in a way that includes everyone. Over back to you, hopefully.
Thank you, Gerald. Very interesting initiative or approach that the IFRC has. I'm not sure how participants in the call today could join this initiative. Maybe you could leave some tips as well. I guess it's to get in touch with their local Red Cross and Red Crescent branch. And for the Red Crosses or Red Crescent people in the call, it's to get in touch with your IFRC office through your national society if they're not yet aware about the YBC program. But yeah, Gerald, we've heard about, the entire approach of YBC earlier. Do you have an actual story or example to share with us on how, a young person or a group of young people has successfully addressed tensions or conflicts within their own communities? Did they take any specific approach and how did they make it work?
Yes, thank you very much, Michelle, for that question. I think definitely. I think one story that really comes to mind and stands out for me comes actually from a place called the Kayin State in Myanmar, and as I think many of our young people are aware nowadays, also that there is currently a civil war going on in Myanmar, and a program that the Myanmar Red Cross, together with IFRC and also Generation Amazing, with the Qatar Football Foundation at the time, organized or supported a program where actually a group of Red Cross youth used a program that we co-developed together using YBC called Football for Development, or F4D in short, as a tool actually for peace building. And it actually started quite modestly. It was a program where a few young volunteers organized weekly football sessions with children and young people from neighboring villages. But what made it different was actually how they combined sports with life skill education. Things like teamwork, fair play, negotiation, and respect for diversity. Things that they actually apply on the playing field in football, and also actually applying it to their daily lives as well. Now, over time, those sessions became more than just games or sports alone. They actually became safe spaces where young people who might not normally interact or who come from communities with tensions among one village to another or one ethnicity to another could connect, play, and actually learn together. And the youth leaders actually used football as the common language to build that trust. Now, it all culminated in a football festival actually last year with more than 250 participants, including boys, girls, and young people with disabilities. One of the most inspiring moments actually was when a young woman led her village's female football team. And at first, some community elders didn't want the girls to participate because, culturally and all of that and cultural norms. But she negotiated respectfully, explaining why it mattered to them, and eventually actually won over their support. And her team actually went on to win. And suddenly, the same leaders who were hesitant became very proud of them as well. And I think what worked was that it was entirely youth-led and inclusive, the football festival. And the young people designed the activities, facilitated first aid demonstrations, and showcased humanitarian services alongside those football matches as well. Topics ranging from landmine risk reduction to blood donation awareness. It was actually a celebration of community resilience and humanity. And I think through football, they managed to shift attitudes, bring people together, and strengthen social cohesion, all while staying true to our Red Cross principles of neutrality and impartiality. And it's always a powerful reminder that sometimes peace starts with something as simple as a game when it's grounded in trust, empathy, and a shared purpose.
Thanks, Gerald, for sharing with us such an interesting and also powerful example. I think our team has also dropped some links in the chat on the program that Gerald just mentioned as well. So if you're interested, feel free to click on the links to understand more. But really, using sports, as a unifying tool in sensitive communities or fragile communities, and we can really see how young people are really leading change there and building peace at really the local levels and at the grassroots levels. I'd like to now turn over to Lincoln. Lincoln, I hope that you're feeling good among, I guess, a room filled with Red Crosses or Red Crescent volunteers. But of course, the Scouts is also our longtime friend across the world. The Red Cross, Red Crescent, and the Scouts also have collaborations at different local levels, but also, for example, at the global level through the Big Six Global Youth Mobilization Initiative. So as a veteran Scout that's very experienced in programming for youth, you're the National Program Commissioner in your country. Can you share any initiatives in Scouting that empower Scouts to also bridge cultural community divides and effectively foster social cohesion?
Yes, thank you so much. Can I share my screen? Yeah, I think it'll be easier. Yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, good evening. Thank you for having me, and thanks, Michelle, as well as the International Federation of Red Cross for inviting me, the Youth Commission. Thank you so much. And actually, from the Scouting point of view, the Scout movement actually we are actually a non-formal non-formal education youth organization. So while we actually I would not say that we are servicing, but rather we actually developed youth from a very young age until when they achieve the age of, I would say, maybe young adults. Okay, so when we talk about really having community services as well as youth impact or community impact, we usually will be looking at those much older. And of course, because they have to come to a legal age, be able to think for themselves before they can actually contribute to the environment. But it doesn't mean that we actually do not educate them at a young age. And based on some of the speakers have spoken just now, especially like Gerald and Sylvia, I think um, education is very important. And I think that is where actually the Scout movement is also playing a very important role. So I'm going just to talk a little bit about what are the things that the Scouts are really working on, especially to prepare them to be these citizens of the world. So we have these initiatives, what we call as the Scouts for SDGs. And of course, the Scouts for SDG, we have it's actually a mobilization of 50 million scouts that leverages on the youth program, our own program, based on the Better World frameworks. And of course, one of our flagship programs or initiatives will be the Messengers of Peace, which actually started off many, many years ago. And currently, it has become one of the 4 thematic areas for our Scouts for SDG initiative, and where we will be raising awareness, taking action towards the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So we have contributed leading to 2030. We have around 50 million young people and 22 million local actions related to 17 goals. This has been all these have been recorded through our Scouts for SDG Hub, and that these are the number of hours that we roughly these are the number of hours that we have contributed to United Nations. So the youth program in general is about how we actually get through the scouting methods, and then we, of course, through the community engagement and through our partners. That's why I'm very happy that Michelle actually invited me, because Red Cross has always been our long standing partners, and we are working very well, not only at the global level, but I think in Malaysia particularly, we are also working very closely. Right. So next. Okay. So the purpose, of course, is for the young people to become active citizens through actions in the community. And when we talk about peace building, of course, that is where our young people will come into play. So some of the thematic areas that we have for our Scouts for SDG, we have, of course, environment and sustainability, peace and community engagement, which is why we actually are also relevant to today's discussion. Health and well-being, of course, skills for life. So these are some of the initiatives that we have, and you can see actually we have Messenger of Peace, and notably we also have Dialogue for Peace, which I will spend a little time talking about Dialogue for Peace as well, because because most of the Scout for SDGs initiatives, each program actually is a collaboration with an external partner. So we are not actually working alone, but we also work very well with our external partners so that our scouts actually will be able to develop the competencies that they need in order for them to be able to be useful in the real world, not only in the classroom, like Gerald said, right? So these are the 4 thematic areas. And for today's topic, we actually have relevance under the sub-themes or the thematic area of peace and community engagement under the Messenger of Peace initiatives. So the Dialogue for Peace program, as well as the Interreligious Dialogue programs, these are under with the collaborations of KAICIT, or what we call as the International Dialogue Center, KAICIT. KAICIT used to be called as the long term, I mean because KAICIT now has become KAICIT due to some issues, so they don't use the long name anymore. They just simply call as International Dialogue Center, and you have a hyphen, then KAICIT. But KAICIT used to be King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Center. So this is actually in Saudi Arabia, and they have all these peace building programs through their fellowship programs, where all of us actually can apply to their fellowship program to be one of their fellows, and where we also support the scouts in this Dialogue for Peace program. So if you go to KAICIT website, you will be able to find that Dialogue for Peace is actually one of their flagship program developed together with the World Scouting. We used to be called as the World Organization of the Scout Movement, but due to the rebranding, now we simply call World Scouting. So if you go through the impact and timeline on their website, you'll also find that KAICIT at the world level, they have also engaged youth members as well as members from the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescents as well in their spreading the Dialogue for Peace flagship programs. Okay, and of course the other one is the Patrimonial under the the UNESCO for Culture and Heritage Education. Right. So the Dialogue for Peace program, like I mentioned just now, actually was developed in collaboration between WOSM and the International Dialogue Center, KAICIT. So these are the overview of the programs. On the 13th of November, we will be celebrating a milestone, or rather the progress of our ongoing Dialogue for Peace project together with 4 countries within the Asia Pacific region, namely Malaysia, okay, and then Singapore, Indonesia, as well as Thailand. So we'll be having our celebration at the headquarters here in Malaysia, because the World Organization of Scout Movement, the Secretary General's office is actually in Malaysia. So we'll be celebrating on the 13th in conjunction with the International Day of Peace. Okay, but due to some reasons, that's why we postpone it to November. Right. Then this is something that I also want to talk to you about. Apart from my role in the scouting movement, or the scout movement, I'm also one of the Yunga focal point in Malaysia. Yunga is actually a youth and United Nations Global Alliance under the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, where they develop or challenge badges under the United Nations to support as well as to provide education, not non-formal education, to youth in order for them to be able to support the SDGs or towards the achievement of SDGs. And one of the badges that we have is the disaster risk reduction, which happily we just completed this with the local Malaysian Red Crescent Society in Kuala Lumpur, just last 2 weeks, if not mistaken. Okay, so these are the pictures that have been posted by Yunga themselves on their social media. So you will be happy to, I mean, you will be seeing those pictures that they have shared. All right, and next week we will be collaborating with APEC with Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, as well as the National Defense University of Malaysia, to organize a APEC Young Professionals in Disaster Risk Management workshop. So this will be, I would say the content, of course, it will be on disaster risk management, development and whatnot, but the scouts will also be playing their role because we will come in when we talk about not only on the ground, but also on those younger persons. We'll be doing a lot of work in terms of education, educating them in terms of awareness and whatnot. So that when they come to a legal age, then they will be able to take on more tasks on the ground. So these are the things that we have been doing. And of course, if you Google in a lot of areas where we are having a lot of disaster as well as wars, you will see that the scouts are actively engaging. And I think one of the challenges that the scouts have is that we are not really the frontliner, so to speak, in humanitarian as well as disaster organization or agencies. So we mainly provide education to prepare them so that they are well prepared for whatever that they need to do in terms of during the mitigation phase, the preparedness phase, response phase, as well as the recovery phase. But I think most of us, we are be able to support through the mitigation, preparedness, as well as the recovery phase. So these are, I would think, the risk will be lower, and because we are not really trained in that area. And of course, based on the countries that we are in, there are agencies that have been coordinated towards that. And I think in Malaysia, we will have the civil service, and then of course with the Red Cross in Malaysia. So yeah, so there's a little bit from the Scout movement. And if you have any other further questions for me, I will be happy to elaborate further. Thank you.
Thanks, Lincoln. The very comprehensive presentation there, and we can really see all the initiatives that the scouts are doing as well in terms of really promoting better citizenship, promoting young people, developing young people, and ensuring that they have the right skill sets and values to form a better world as well. My next question goes back to Gerald. Jara, I think we can all agree that our current environment is quite fragile in the sense that, we live in a very polarized world. A lot of people are adopting an us versus them mindset or mentality. And we're also observing more global actors resorting to confrontation and violence instead of dialogue. What do you think are the root causes that are driving this, and how can we shift this trajectory?
Thank you very much, Michelle. I think that's such an important question and actually quite a difficult one. Because what we are seeing today is actually a world where fear and mistrust often speak louder than understanding. And I think a lot of this polarization comes from a combination of uncertainty and disconnection, fragmentation in our communities. And people everywhere are facing rapid changes, economic pressures globally, climate anxiety, as we see a lot of reports, social inequality, and also information overload. And when people feel unheard or left behind, I think it becomes easy to retreat into groups that feel safe or familiar. The us versus them mindset grows out of fear of difference, and fear of losing identity, fear of not having control. And on top of that, the way information spreads today, especially on social media, can amplify anger faster than empathy. And we've built systems that reward outrage more than understanding, right? Things are always more viral when it's, more, controversial or more sensitive in nature. And so dialogue, is being replaced by these echo chambers, and empathy, usually gets drowned out. So to shift this trajectory, I think we need to rebuild trust and connection, and starting at the community level or even at the individual level. And this is where young people can actually play a vital role because, they are naturally more open, more curious and collaborative. Initiatives like the YBC program that we have just mentioned are exactly about this. It's really creating safe spaces for honest conversations where people can listen without judgment and reconnect them on a very human basic level as well. And we also need to promote this emotional literacy, the ability to recognize and manage our emotions and biases, something that YABC and other similar programs, as I'm sure Lincoln has mentioned, Messengers of Peace and Peace Dialogues as well, emphasize deeply. And because peace doesn't start in meeting rooms or in the negotiation tables, it starts actually within us, and that's what YABC is trying to do. Making a change within our own self, understanding our own biases, our own prejudices that we might have, and in how we treat one another, and also we speak with one another, and how we choose actually empathy over anger. And if we empower these communities and young people, especially young people, to engage in dialogue rather than division, to see each other as humans first rather than just a screen, a character across a screen, then we begin to change the narrative. It's not about agreeing on everything, but about restoring the courage to listen. And that's how we slowly move from confrontation back to connection.
Thank you so much, Gerald. Quite deep there, but I think, very insightful in terms of what you shared about a lot of probably why people choose conflict stems from fear as well. And also you shed some light about, the role that young people has, in terms of, trying to drive our communities to maybe choose peace first instead of violence foremost. Turning it back over to Lincoln. Lincoln, obviously, when I introduced you earlier, we all know that besides, what you bring from Scouts, you also have a unique perspective as a linguist because you also work in crisis translation. So I'm sure that you might have observed or seen how language and communication is also an important tool for peace. Have you observed any barriers in communicating about concepts such as, peace building, especially in cross-cultural contexts and diverse communities that might have different values and norms? And what are some of your recommendations to address these challenges?
Yes, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm not going to be very academic here. I'm just going to speak plainly. Actually, from the crisis translation point of view, of course, we talk about language is being used as a mode of communication, especially during time of disasters, right? So that one of the biggest challenge is that I can't speak for other countries, but countries like Malaysia, we are a multilingual country. So it becomes even more difficult if people on the ground, for example, like us, the volunteers, going on the ground to speak in a language that is not understood by those who are affected. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are affected by natural disaster, especially in Malaysia, these are not those people who can actually afford, or rather we talk about in terms of where they stay, and then we will know that these people will not have access to the mainstream, or they don't consume mainstream media or whatsoever, so to speak, or they may not be able to speak the language or understand, okay, because they come from different part of the social economy background, etc. So having said that, this is very important that we have a set of people that we call them as citizens translators. So that is also the second part of my research, where I'm trying to develop a curriculum to train citizen translators. So citizen translators are very important because a lot of times when we talk about translation, we always consider these to be professional services that will be provided by professional translators. But how many people can afford those services? But the training must be there. So that's why I will look at some of the things that we will actually have a lot of citizen translators. And the citizen translators will help us in terms of those people can speak the local dialect as well as the mainstream languages so that they can actually interpret and translate for the local people during time of crisis. So yeah, so that is something that I have noticed that actually language plays a very important role, especially when we want to, whatever we do actually during time of crisis, access to information is very important. And the access of information can only, I mean, effective access to information can only be achieved through communication. And if we find that communication is not effective during the time of crisis, then you will see a lot of abuses. You will see a lot of exploitation, etc., especially by those who actually have an upper hand or will be at an advantage side in when dealing with the people who are affected by crisis. So I think that's a little bit from the work that I've been doing, and I think language really plays a very important role, especially during time of crisis in order for them to achieve equitable or the basic rights to access to information. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lincoln. That indeed language and speaking the local language especially is important. I think this is probably one of the strengths of young people as well, especially young people who are immersed in their own communities and thus speak their local language. It could also be, one of their strengths in terms of how they can help to bridge communication between, say, more formal approaches or more formal concepts or like textbook knowledge versus, what can be easily digested by communities. So thanks for reminding us of that, Lincoln. I know we're at the top of the sort of like meeting time. So before I let the both of you go, maybe one final statement each from both of you. I think today is just the start, especially within the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, for us to try to shift the narrative and truly position young people as peace actors. What is one message that you would give to the young people joining us today from around the world, either from the big six youth organizations or some of them might just be, local youth within their own communities interested in peace building and trying to start their own peace building journey? What is one message that you would like to give to them today? Gerald?
Yes, so, well, my one message to young people, especially who are joining us today, is that you don't have to wait to be given permission, especially to lead. Start where you are, start with what you have. If you see tensions or exclusions, use your voice and creativity to bridge that gap. And whether it's through sports, through arts, dialogue, or digital storytelling, every act of kindness and courage counts. And remember, peace building is not a destination, it is a daily practice. And you'll make mistakes, you'll face challenges. But if you keep your values of empathy, neutrality, and respect at the core, you'll already be changing the world around you.
Lincoln, over to you.
Okay, I have a different angle to look at what are the youth members or our youth should be focusing on when we talk about peace building. Is that I myself actually also I've been teaching critical thinking skills at a university. So I think that the critical thinking skills, just like Gerald said, actually they play a very important role in whatever we do because it stems from our thinking and then how we actually translate it into actions. So I would say that everything that we do, even for the adults as well, if we go to places, because we talk about peace building, we always talk about conflict. Without conflict, then we don't talk about peace, right? Because peace can be seen as a solution to the conflict. So having said that, if we go into taking action straight away without thinking about the risk, I think for adults, there will be risk is because we have the resources, we probably have more experience, so we know how to mitigate the risks. But for the young people, because of the lack of resources, lack of experience, so they need guidance. So I would think that whatever they want to do, they should be focusing using their critical thinking skills. Yes, they can be creative about the solution they can, but they always have to focus on what we call as you have to think global, act local. So it's not just regionally or geographically. Think global, act local here can mean that before you can do big things, you have to do it. Something that you do must be scalable in the sense that if you're at your level, at your age, you don't have to do something like will earn you a peace prize, a Nobel Peace Prize. So you must think of the risk. I think it's very important, even in our line of duties, in our line of working. They must have the knowledge as well as they must have the urgency to think about risk management. So they must think about that before jump into actions, because we do not want that you try to do good, but it backfires, and then it will demotivate you further. So I think we have to allow the young people to be able to contribute at their level. When I say at their level, means at the time when they can do at their age, with the resources that they have, with the economy situation that they are currently in, because not all of them are financially free like us, so to speak. So, and also freedom. So these are the risks I think they will have to be critical about before jumping into actions. But actions doesn't mean that they need to be on the ground. A lot of times it can be through campaigns, and then they use the power of social medias, use like what Cheryl said, use your voice. Even using voice also, they need to be very careful. You don't go to the street and protest and whatnot. So all these things, they come with risks. So I would suggest that young people now, instead of acting recklessly to achieve a noble goal of achieving peace, I think we need to take a step back and reevaluate before we jump into things, because things are becoming very complex nowadays. It's not as simple as it used to be. Just like when we talk about CPR, you helping some other people on the ground, it may backfire, you may be, sued because of something else, right? So these are the things that I think the young people will have to think before jumping into actions. Yeah, or consult any of the older people if they want to do things at their level as well as within their limitations. I think that's from me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lincoln. Two very different perspectives from actually one of them is not youth age anymore in IFRC standards, but I think in GYM standards it's still youth age. I won't tell you which one is which. But yeah, two very different perspectives from Gerald and Lincoln, and I think still both golden nuggets for us to take away from today's session. Once again, thank you so much, Gerald and Lincoln, for joining me here today and for sharing your very thoughtful insights as well as very concrete examples on initiatives within your organizations that nurture young people to be peace builders and are principle based and value based. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank all of our participants today for, joining us throughout the past 1.5 hours. We actually still have a breakout session, but because we're already at the top of the hour, you can feel free to stay or leave if you need to for other engagements. But since we'll officially end the session here today, but for those of you who want to stay for the breakout session, don't leave after we finish the photo taking sessions. And I'll also like to kindly request you to please rename yourselves to your preferred language format so that our technical teams can still place you in the correct breakout rooms later on. To rename yourself, you just need to click on the participants icon at the bottom of your Zoom window, hover over your name in the list, click more or the 3 dots next to your name, select rename, enter your name in the correct format, which is to include your language code at the start of your name, and then click OK. Thank you so much for helping us to make the breakout room smooth and inclusive as well, and to ensure that you can participate successfully. But before we move into the breakout room, I'll also like to invite all of you to please fill in the survey that we have for this session to evaluate the sessions. Let us know whether you enjoyed it, whether you didn't. Tell us what we can do better so that we can deliver both the GYM team, the IFRC team, but the rest of the big 6 organizations as well can deliver more impactful online sessions for you. And before those of you that need to leaves, I would also like to invite everyone to please turn on your camera if you would like to be part of our group photo session. We will be post. We will not be. We might not post. We might post, but we're going to take a quick group photo screenshot. Those of you who are here today with the session, if you don't feel comfortable to turn on your camera, feel free to stay cameraless. But yeah, if you feel comfortable, we will be taking a group photo. So I'll give everyone 5 more seconds to turn on your camera, sorry. All right, I believe those of us who wants to turn our cameras on have already done so, and we will have our professional screenshotters taking the pictures.
Okay, smart. Okay, then. Thank you.
Michelle, you mute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in the group photo session and to mark your attendance. I'll also like to thank the interpreters who have helped us to ensure that today's session is inclusive and accessible for all of you who have participated. As I mentioned earlier, if you need to, you can take your leave now, but if you'd like to stay with us, for a while more and interact with other participants in the room, we will shortly move into the breakout sessions where you can discuss some of the concepts that we have presented today with other peers from today's session. All right. Also, the survey form has been left in the chat as well. So please remember to fill it in and let us know your thoughts on how you felt today's session went. Okay, I still see a lot of you staying in the session, and I believe that you're all people who are interested to speak to one another and to discuss about peace building. So yes, we will also stop the recording now so that you can feel comfortable in your breakout room.